Hi friends, welcome back to Scale Model Kit Review Studio, and welcome back to another episode of the Agora models of British SAS Jeep. Let's get started. Welcome back, my friends, to Scale Model Kit Review Studio, and welcome back to another installment of the Agora models build the SAS Willy's Jeep. Now this is 1/8 scale, die cast in plastic, very detailed representation of the North African British SAS Willy's Jeep. I am currently working on pack 5. And if you think you'd like to get this for yourself, head over to Agora Models. I put a direct link in the description below. Also, Agora Models just started their campaign with the Jaws Orca boat. I think it's 1/16 scale this boat is, and you're going to see that on my channel also. Okay, so I'll be working on 8 more stages, stage 31 through 38. Don't forget, you can go online, the download center of Agora Models, and view or download the instructions for this build. So, stage 31 is fitting the front right wheel, and in here you can see we have the other fender that we still need to install. Stage 32, fitting the voltage regulator and the battery. Stage 33, we're going to continue building the radiator. We started that in the previous pack. Stage 34, fitting the engine and radiator grille. So we're going to be installing the engine. That's cool. Stage 35 is the tire. Stage 36 is the wheel. We're going to combine those two together for one little segment of the video. Stage 37 is fitting the front bumper. And then stage 38 is fitting the towing hook. Okay, so we did receive the floor with that. Doesn't look like we install it just yet. Okay, without further ado, let's head over and get started on stage 31. Here's the parts for stage 31. Let's get a closer look. Alright, DM, FM, and OM screws. We received the right fender. Very cool there. You can see it still retains the olive drab inside the engine compartment and painted over with the desert yellow with that. And then you have a brace for the fender. So I brought over the chassis, that's this right here, and here's our right fender. And on the bottom of the right fender, it's marked with an R. It also has a couple of alignment tabs that line up to the frame on the chassis. So we'll do that. And then 2 FM screws go into this. And with this, you don't want to put too much pressure on the chassis. Try to support the frame while you drive those screws in. There we go. So the alignment tab is actually on, goes to the top of the fender, and then we put 2 more screws into that. We put some 2 DM screws into that, and 2 DM screws went in tight. That's how that looks there. Next, we're going to go ahead and install the wheel and tire on this side. And that's already been built up. It should be in your spares box. That gets mounted with an OM screw. before I actually mount the wheel to the axle, I like to get the threads started on the axle first without anything installed, because you're going to be cutting the threads with this screw, this OM screw. So I'm going to put some oil on it and let the threads cut themselves. Screw it all the way in. And then back it out. So now we're ready for the wheel and tire. Now on our wheel and tire, we put the cap on, and there's a spacer inside. So we'll pop that off with the screwdriver. And there's our spacer and the cap. We'll simply put that down to help lubricate it, which I may do. I'm going to put a little Vaseline on that, and I'll put Vaseline around that axle. That works. Put the wheel on. There we go. And the spacer, I'm going to insert it on the screw. Insert the spacer on the screw here and drive it home. You don't want to over tighten it, just snug so it can still rotate. There we go. That's good there. And then you can put the cap on. Perfect. And that completes stage 31. Let's head over and get started on stage 32. Alright, so here's the parts for stage 32. Voltage regulator, battery, and jerry can. Let's get a closer look. Here's a close-up of those parts. Here's our battery. Looks like a 3-cell battery. More than likely 6 volt from back in the day. Voltage regulator, DP, SM, and CP screws, and of course the jerry can. Alright, going to mount the voltage regulator to the right fender, and it simply goes down right there. There's 4 holes for it, and 4 SM screws go into that. Alright, so I got the voltage regulator mounted, got all 4 screws in. They're loose right now. So make sure you get them all started and then tighten them down. Don't over tighten them because it could actually break the plastic for the voltage regulator. Also pay attention that your little oval circle on top is just like that. Next we'll install the battery. If you look at it from underneath, you'll see there's an alignment tab that sticks out more. That lines up with that large hole, so it only goes on one way. Once you have that on, then you can flip it over and put your screw in on the back side. Looks like it's a CP screw on the underside. Alright, the voltage regulator and the battery are installed. With the voltage regulator, I did use metal screws that go into metal, so I did use some 3-in-1 oil on those. And of course the screw that went in for the battery underneath is used for plastic, so don't lubricate that, and just put it in till it's snug. Don't over tighten it because it could strip. Now let's go ahead and build the jerry can next. Alright, so the jerry can is very easy to assemble. Put the 2 halves together and put 2 DP screws into it on the side there. And just put them in till they're snug. Don't over tighten them because it's going into plastic. It could easily strip. And then we can take our handle, and that just press fits in place. There you go. And the cap press fits in place. And then this can actually has some plugs to hide the screw holes, and they just press fit. And you want to make sure that the ejector pin mark on this plug is on the inside. There you go. And that's the completed jerry can. So that completes stage 32. Let's get started on stage 33. For stage 33, here's the parts for that. This is the radiator. Let's get a closer look. Here's those parts. Got CP and EP screws, and we have the back side of the radiator where the fan inserts into. That's very nice there. We also have the front side of the radiator, which is very visible on this Jeep because of the design that they cut the grille parts off the front and give additional cooling for this. And this is the top of the radiator, the cap. And with our radiator here, we're going to take and mount the front to the back. Make sure that your two holes on the bottom here, those go on the bottom. They'll mount to the frame eventually. And then this is the top, and that's going to line up with the top of this, just like that. We'll put 2 EP screws into this from this side. Then the cap, top of the radiator gets mounted on there, and you can see there's the radiator cap that lines up with this notch here off to the side. It press fits down, just like that. We go ahead and put a CP screw in that hole right there, and CP screws going in till it's snug. That's good. That holds the cap in place. And now we're going to go ahead and mount this to the chassis. Bring the chassis over. We'll put the cap on last, it looks like. Alright, so the radiator will get mounted down on the chassis here. There's 2 mounting points. And then, of course, the bottom of the radiator has 2 holes, right there and right there. We're going to put CP screws into that from underneath. And it should look something like that. And both screws were installed, one right there and one right there, holding the radiator on. And that's what that looks like. And from the side and from the front. And the radiator cap was press fit in place. You can see that right there. And see how that tab faces. It really only goes on one way. That completes stage 33. Let's head over and get started on stage 34. Here's the parts for stage 34, fitting the engine and the radiator grille. Let's get a closer look at the parts. Here's a close-up of those parts. Here's our air intake for the carburetor that gets mounted on top of the engine. Here's our lower radiator hose. Both of those are plastic. We have our battery terminal cable, and I think that's the overflow for the radiator also. We have our grill mounts and our cover for the transmission mount. FM, DM, CM, EM, and well, they're black EMs and then tan EMs, desert sand EM. Man, you can just see it right there. That's how it looks. Both sides. Okay, so I took my cables, my rubber cables there, and I cut them 4 centimeter and 7 centimeter. So now we'll go ahead and put our battery terminals on that. I put a little super glue on the end to help hold it in place, and just like that. We'll do both of them. CA glue or super glue, as people call it. And there we go. Let those dry a bit. And the shorter battery cable gets mounted to the front of the battery base there. There's a tab that sticks up. I super glued it in place. There we go, perfect. That snapped in place. So the longer battery cable gets mounted to the starter solenoid on top there. I used a little bit of super glue, and we're getting ready to mount this to the chassis, the engine. Alright, so I brought the chassis over and I'm ready to install the engine on this. The engine mounts to 3 points, 2 up front, which are your engine mounts up front, and then 1 in the back for the, off the transmission itself. We're going to use 2 FM screws up front, they're large screws, and a DM screw in the back, which is a smaller screw. Now, I took my battery cable and I ran it to the bracket above, or right below the alternator or the generator. They didn't have alternators back then, this is a generator. And that way it's kind of out of the way. Now we want to make sure that our exhaust system here gets routed in front of our steering gearbox. So we'll kind of go at an angle with it to drop it in, and line up our holes with the engine on top and on the sides. So what I think I can do is put the transmission in first, leave it loose. And that's this back here. Okay, so it's in and loose. And then I'm going to take my battery cable and pull that out. Put it on top there. There we go. And we can see my exhaust system is routed where it needs to be, but I want to move my brake cable above it because it's kind of in the way. So now the engine's lined up. I routed my brake cable above that exhaust pipe so it's not hanging down under the chassis. Probably isn't correct, but I just didn't want it hanging down. Now I can go ahead and put my 2 FM screws up front in. The back one is installed, but it's loose. And I'll put some oil on those. Go to the other side and tighten this side down here. And I'm holding the chassis up with my hand. I don't want to put any pressure down on the axles. Would be a bad thing, you could break the axle. So just be careful with that. And then I'll go ahead and tighten down the back one. And all 3 are tightened down. The engine is mounted. We made sure we paid attention to our battery cable and battery cable coming from the starter. That's this right here, and that will reach over to the battery. I'll plug it in a second. Also paid attention to the exhaust. So you can see how the exhaust looks right there, and we'll just take and line it up to the exhaust, and there you go. You may want to put a little super glue on that, but mine looks good. It snapped right in where it needs to be, and that's how that looks. And I ran my brake line above the exhaust so it's not hanging down, because it was kind of long and hanging down there. So that's how that looks. And the battery cable does get plugged in next. There we go, clicked in. Now we can mount the radiator grille. Alright, next we're going to install the grille. And the grille has several areas that mount to the front of the car here, front of the Jeep. Now they call this 1K, and that's just a little plastic mount. it's going to mount underneath the radiator right there. It goes, make sure it's pushed into that slot. It gets mounted there, and a screw goes into that later. We also have press-in connections that we put in earlier that the grill is going to mount to from the bottom there. Have these tabs that stick out. And then also we have screws that go in on the sides and on the top. So we got a lot to do here with this radiator. So we're just going to fit everything in place. Make sure the mount is... Alright, so I put in DM screws on the side of the grill, both sides right there. That's a little fiddly. I had a difficult time getting the holes lined up, but just try to get the front of the grill flush with the fender. You can see that for both sides. And then I put in on top, I put in the 2 CM screws on top, and they are black. And then the bottom of the grill, I ended up breaking the tab where it's supposed to mount, and that's that right there. So I just glued the tab back in place, but it doesn't line up. But you're supposed to put a screw underneath there, but that's not going to happen because it's not lining up. Okay. Now we'll move on. The grill is installed. We'll go ahead and install the lower radiator hose next. And that mounts right there off the side of the water pump and down to the bottom left side of the radiator. Because the lower radiator hose is inserted into the water pump there and wraps around and snaps right into the hole on the bottom of the radiator. The next thing that gets installed is the top radiator hose, and that will get screwed down on top of the valve cover on top and gets it slotted into the radiator. Okay, on top there. 3 black EM screws are used for that. Okay. And all 3 EM screws are installed and tight. And that's what that looks like there. Looks good. And the last thing I do is install the cover on top of the transmission mount. Just like that. Press fits in place in 2 corners and 2 screws hold it down. And 2 EM screws were used to hold down that cover plate. And that completes stage 34. We got the front grille installed, the engine installed, and everything looks great there. Everything's lined up. The exhaust system's lined up. Looks great. That completes stage 34. Let's get started on stage 35 and 36. We're going to combine those 2 together because we're assembling the wheel and tire. Alright, so I'm going to combine 2 stages for this part of the video, stage 35 and 36. 35 is the tire, 36 is the wheel. Let's go ahead and get a closer look at these parts. Alright, here's our parts up close, and of course here's the tire. The tire is very solid and hard, so in order for us to install the wheel parts, and these are the metal wheel parts, we need to take and heat up the tire in boiling water. I typically like to take and boil it for about 3 minutes, and then makes it easier to install your wheel halves onto the tire. We have CM, BM, and OM screws. We have the cap and the drum assembly, and this looks like a sextant or some kind of a telescope of some sort, a rangefinder maybe for their guns, but I'm just thinking this is a sextant for navigating. Alright, going to go ahead and assemble the sextant here first. And first two parts go together. There's a flat tab that this lines up to, so it only goes on one way. And it's press fit. Just like that. That's how that looks there. Then we'll put the scope on top of that. That press fits down on top also. Just like that. That's how that looks. And then the last thing is your little calibration meter. And that's why I think this is a sextant, because sextants have that. Sextants are for navigating with the moon at night. And it only goes on one way. It has a flat on it. Very small tab. We'll line that up. Perfect. That's how that looks up close. So our sextant is complete. Very cool. Now the next step is to build the wheel-in tire. Heating up the tire makes it a lot easier to get the wheel assembly inserted and get your holes lined up and get your screws in. So that's the next step here. Is I'm going to take the tire and drop it in boiling water for like 3 minutes, and then it'll be nice and soft and pliable and we can work with it. I'll do that and I'll be right back. But first they want us to put the drum on, so I'll go ahead and do that, line that up, and 2 CM screws go into that. And both screws are installed and tight. Now we can go ahead and heat up the tire. Alright, I'm back. Tire heated up, and you can see it's very pliable now. Very easy. So we'll take our rim and put it on one side, and then we've got the other side. We'll line up our holes. Very easy to do here. Just like that. I'll hold it together because the tire is still hot, and we'll put our screws in. And I'll use my larger screwdriver and PH1 screwdriver for this. All the screws are tight, and that's what that looks like there. Looks good. Now we're going to go ahead and mount this to the chassis. It looks like it goes on the left rear. Bring over the chassis, and it will go on the left rear here. Now, just like I did before, I'm going to go ahead and pre-start my screw on the axle before I install it. There we go. So now I can go ahead and put my put my spacer on the screw first, little round spacer, and then screw it home. And the next thing we do, once that's tightened down, is we put our cap on here that has the lug nuts, and that press fits over the top. And then we put our cap on top of that, press fit that in place. There you go. That's how that looks there. And that completes stage 35 and 36. Let's get started on stage 37. Here's the parts for stage 37, and this would be the front bumper. Let's get a closer look. DM screws, and the front bumper itself made of metal. Very nice. Alright, so we're just going to line up the bumper to the holes that are on the frame. We have 4 on the top and 4 on the bottom, and we're going to be using DM screws for that. Alright, the bumper is fully installed. I put 4 screws on the top and 4 on the bottom. They are secure. Looks great. That completes stage 36. Let's get started on the final stage of this video, stage 38. Here's the parts for the final stage for this video, stage 38. And we're going to install the pintle hook on this, and we also received the floor. Let's get a closer look. CM and CP screws. We have our interior floor, which is made of metal. I'm going to leave it in the blister pack for now because we're not going to do anything with it for this stage. But we're going to assemble the parts here for the pintle hook and install that on the chassis. There's a close-up of the parts. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and install the handle for the pintle hook. And it gets inserted on the top here, lines up with the top hole. And we're going to put a CP screw into that to hold it in place. Next we take and mount that like that and put another CP screw into that, right like that. Now we're going to mount this to the chassis, the back bumper. And both CM screws are installed, one on each side there. Pintle hook is installed. So that completes stage 38. I'll be right back. And there you go. That completes pack 5. We did a lot in this pack. Installed the engine, fenders, we installed some tires here. We received the floor, a jerry can, and a sextant. Looks great. This is really shaping up. I'm very pleased with this. So if you think you'd like to get this for yourself, head over to agoramodels.com and subscribe to this build today. They have many options available. Pick an option that best suits you for subscribing to this. I put a direct link in the description below. Anyway, thank you all for watching my video, and thank you all who subscribe to my channel. Please subscribe and hit that like button. Until next time, happy modeling everybody, and take care.